jail for
I understand
their
that they're
crimes.
not willingly going to jail, but what I'm saying is the forced relinquishment of free will in this instance is morally acceptable because they have committed a crime that threatens themselves or
Yeah, I
others.
don't know
I'm
what
not
you're saying, bro.
disputing whether or not
I don't know
it's
what you're
moral.
saying.
That would
Yes.
make my point for me, though.
So I'm not trying to talk about those who have already had their free will relinquished on the basis that they have committed a crime that threatens themselves or others. I'm trying to talk about people who are not criminals, who have not relinquished their free will, who are here in this country and deserve the right to choose what they do with themselves and their bodies. Now,
Okay. Well, I mean,
back
you're making a
to-
lot of suppositions there that I just kind of like don't agree with.
Yeah, it's too
So
much.
you don't think that
it's hard
people
to follow.
deserve the right to bodily autonomy?
There you go. I don't.
What makes someone deserve the right to bodily autonomy?
Well, when you say bodily autonomy, would you agree then that a fetus has bodily autonomy?
I'm talking right now about human beings.
Well, I consider those human beings, though.
I'm talking right
You're saying you use force to protect your rights. People vote. People also physically demonstrate presence to protect their right. It is why speech is important. One of the first things you learn is speech. Yeah, but I think we're missing something here, right? You're right? So you use force to protect your rights, but who people vote? But what about if you vote, but the enforcement itself disagree with that vote? You see what I'm saying, Wacko? Let's say that you vote to protect that right, but the people that enforce those rights said no, we're not going to enforce that vote. In that case, who protects those rights?
now about people who can talk and walk, who are independent, singular organisms.
So people who are in comas, they have no rights?
Dude, you keep doing comas and prisoners and fetuses. Just
You're
talk
getting
about
caught.
a fucking person.
That,
What about
that
you
is
and
a
me?
person.
Just talk about a person who is not an exception, who is not in a medical state of physical.
Yeah, but what we're trying to determine right now is the worldview. You say people deserve to have bodily autonomy. And then you give me the criteria for bodily autonomy, and then I can instantly point to an example where you agree
That's
that
not
they...
what we're trying to do. What you're
Great
trying
question.
to do
What am I trying
is
to
create
do?
a gotcha so you don't have to answer the genuine question that I'm asking.
What's the
you.
genuine question you're asking?
The question is...
This is where things
do
goes down
people,
rail.
Regardless of outliers, does the average person who has not committed a crime, who is not inside of another person, who is not brain dead or in a coma, deserve bodily autonomy?
Depending on what you mean by that.
Bodily autonomy being defined as the ability to choose what you do with your body so long as you are not threatening other people's bodily autonomy.
No.
No, because if you do harm to yourself, will that constitute bodily autonomy? You see what I'm saying? If you hurt yourself, you're still hurting something. Does that mean that in that case you have to be okay with you have to be okay with people deleting themselves, or if you stop them for deleting themselves, you have to even give them the leeway to just delete themselves, I guess. I don't know.
Why not?
Because I would say that things like laws against unaliving yourself would be completely appropriate, and things like this, which would be a violation of your bodily autonomy by your criteria.
So you think that because people can't unalive themselves?
No, I'm saying you gave me the criteria for what bodily autonomy means, right? You asked me what an objection would be against it, and I just gave you one.
Okay, so let's cut out that outlier. Do you think that people who are not inside another person, who have not committed a violent crime against themselves or others, and who are not currently brain dead and are conscious and capable of perceiving the world, do you think that those people deserve bodily autonomy?
No, based on the
Why
example
not?
I just gave you.
Just because people have the capacity to unalive themselves, no one deserves bodily autonomy.
By the definition that
Yeah,
you
see?
just gave, we could not give them bodily autonomy definitionally by that definition, because
Definitely by that definition.
definitionally by that definition, yes. So I could say definitionally by some other definition, but I'm giving you the referent to your definition.
We don't deserve bodily autonomy.
Not by your
because-
definition, because that would prevent us from preventing people from like doing suicide and things like this.
So we don't deserve bodily autonomy because under my definition of bodily autonomy, we cannot prevent someone from killing themselves.
Correct.
But that's not a violent act.
Oh
Yeah,
my
that's
God. it is still a violent act if you're, trying to cut, yourself. It is still a violent act. If I take a hammer and for some reason I decided to, you know what I'm saying, to myself, you're still creating the action of harm. You're still creating the action of harm, even if it is to yourself. That's why bodily autonomy is not even the right approach to this. I don't even think we do, guys. Seriously, because we go to prison because of this. If you try to do harm to yourself, we go to prison. If they catch you before the thing happened, where you're pressing the delete button to yourself, right? You still go to prison, or you go to the, I forgot where they put you, where crazy people are. I'm trying to avoid certain things here on YouTube. So bodily autonomy is not a concept. It's not a real concept. I don't think it's real, guys. I don't even think it's possible. Let me know what you guys think.
It's a real violent act.
Why can't, under my definition, you can't prevent someone from killing themselves?
Because it would violate your rule for what bodily autonomy is.
I said so long as you are not a threat to yourself.
Rocco, you saying that you protect your rights even if the world deems you as in the wrong for protecting rights? Is why education is important, or people should be aware of philosophy in order to understand this. My bad. English is not my first language. It's my second language. Let me see. You asking, is God real? Well, physically, I don't think he's real. Physical God is not real. Now, through my faith, I have to say yes, because it's my faith. But physically, I cannot go and grab God. I cannot point, hey, God is there. I cannot do that, right? Because even himself, he doesn't really portray himself as a physical being. So I cannot say he's real. I cannot point at him. Hey, God, he's right there in the clouds, flying. I can't do that.
Or others.
Through my faith, yes.
So that includes
but not
you.
as a
So you would
physical
relinquish your bodily autonomy if you were a threat to yourself.
Then I think that it would then just be trivially true that you don't really mean bodily autonomy anymore, because what you do is you say bodily autonomy with all of these exceptions where we can violate bodily autonomy.
But that's like 3 exceptions. It's exceptions that...
It's not like 3 exceptions.
exist.
It's many exceptions. What about somebody who's just like cutting themselves with a razor blade? Can we stop them? What about a person who just says that they want to cut off their right arm because they think it'll be fun? Can we stop them? Like, there's so many examples I can give you of where we would violate people's bodily autonomy. What about a person who's having like a manic episode and doesn't want to go to the hospital? Can we violate their bodily autonomy?
Well, they're a threat to themselves or others. So again, that would fall in the...
What if they're not a threat? What if they're just having like a manic episode? They don't want to leave their house. You just perceive it that way.
That happens all the time. Those
Exactly. So we violate that, whatever you consider, by your definition, bodily autonomy. When you say people deserve that, and I say absolutely not by that definition, because I can point to 300 different reasons why we would need to violate it.
So is there any definition of bodily autonomy that you think that
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of a definition of bodily autonomy I would agree to that I wouldn't think we should be able to violate.
So you don't think that people should have the ability to control themselves and their bodies under any circumstance because
I didn't say under.
I'm Catholic and I believe Christ is King. God is my witness, 100%. 100%. I can say I got some experience that, it's not empirical, right? It's more like how they call it, my own experience, right? That I can say that God is great and God works in a very mysterious way, but I cannot point at him, right? I cannot say God is in the clouds, look at him, he's just flying in his flying nimbus, I can't do that, right? Because I don't think that's how it works, right? It's through your faith that you make him real.
Or any circumstance.
So what's the circumstance in which people should have the right to control their body?
Yeah, so
risen.
Well, for me, I would say that if it's in some type of case of will, that you could do that. But I mean, ultimately, I think
free will.
Yeah, no, in case of will. So I'm not sure that I believe in some universalized right for bodily autonomy, and you haven't really given me any definitional reason why I should.
But
here.
I don't understand why you don't believe in bodily autonomy. Why don't
because
you believe in
my
why don't
understanding
people
of
have
what
the right to
bodily
control themselves?
autonomy is that you basically have the right to do whatever you want, absent the infringement of somebody else's bodily autonomy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why don't you think people should
Because
have the right
I
to do
think that I need to many times infringe on people's bodily autonomy for their good or
I
society.
got you, Johnny.
that? Why are you
I got you.
constantly infringing on other people's bodily autonomy? What are you up
What
to?
do you mean?
What you just said, I feel the need to.
Yeah, well, I would use force doctrine for that, meaning voting, things
so
like that, to violate
when
bodily
are you
autonomy.
when are you forcing
When I
yourself
go
onto
vote.
others to bodily?
I'm forcing my will when I go vote on other people through force doctrine.
No, you're not, because they all have a vote.
Great. Can I vote
mean,
it?
not according to
Okay.
you, but
I can vote and you can vote, right?
yes,
Okay, you want abortions to be legal?
yes,
If I vote against that, am I voting against your bodily autonomy?
yes.
There we
Thank
go.
you.
That's it.
Okay.
Can we move on now?
That's it. That's it. That's it. Take your break, man. And at that point, that's it, guys. That's it. That is it. If you're in favor of banning guns, right, and you vote against it, but then I vote in favor of it, I just cancel your vote. That's why Andrew was giving the argument at the beginning of what kind of people need to vote, because the people with more experience, right, their vote is being canceled for those that has less experience. Yeah, there you go.
Can't move on
It
now.
went
No,
like
we
this.
can't
It was
move on.
circle.
Okay.
Well, Andrew, you still haven't explained why humans don't deserve bodily autonomy. Like, what are
I
you
just
saying?
explained it to you.
So then, who should control people?
Wacko, you're saying, are we in God's mind? That's not the question. How do you know that God has a mind?
Well, in this case, we would use groupings of laws under. And from my view, it would be like Christian ethics. From your view, it would be like, I don't know, shared bizarre intuitions or whatever, where you think that. I don't know. Well, I don't know where
Why
it
are
is that
guessing
you.
what I believe?
Exactly. Yep.
Stop.
Do you believe in God?
EOD, exactly. He suggested households should vote as a single unit to avoid that type of contradiction. You know what's crazy? You know what's a good example of that? Wisconsin, they just elected a female for I think the state judges, state Supreme Court. Women voted. Majority of women voted for them, even though they voted for Trump in the 2024 election. See how that's strange? That's how strange that is. Females that came out and voted for that female state Supreme Court. For what? You canceled your own vote. And we can get into that. I don't want to get into that. But that's a good example of that how incongruent some of these positions are, even when it comes down to this level of responsibility.
I'm on the fence about
Then
it.
it's just intuition. So everything that you believe is probably just
So
intuition.
you believe? Well, I mean, there's also facts and like physical evidence, but you know.
Oh, you don't
so
wanna get into
believe-
that.
Facts and physical.
Yeah, you don't wanna
evidence
get into
require
that.
An interpreter, right?
Like eyes and ears.
They
and a brain?
require you
100%.
to interpret them.
Complete contradiction.
So you're saying that facts are different for everyone, regardless of how they interpret.
Well, they require an interpreter, and the interpreter can interpret them however they choose, and then can
That
make
most of the
moral
time
prescriptions
Michigan
based
doesn't
on
make-
those.
I'm
But
not
when we
saying
get to the moral
Yeah,
prescriptions,
I know.
Facts don't change based on your.
but your
personal-
moral
I know, right?
prescriptions based on the facts do.
Yeah,
That's
you're
why
crazy, man.
they require interpreters. So I'm not really willing to kind of cede the
Every
ground.
fact, but you are
Yeah.
your own personal interpreter now.
Yeah, I interpret things.
Yeah, and we have to be careful with that, right? Immigration, man, I don't want to get to that because I don't want my channel to get kind of chatter banned. But there's a lot of topics that we can enter through the lens of the ideology of feminism, and all that, all those concerns has to do with that. Has to do with that, guys.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And so do I. That's
Yeah,
how
no, but I
facts
just
work.
don't-
We
I-
all see
but I-
facts and then we make
Yeah,
our
right,
own
but I
conscious
haven't-
judgments about those facts.
Right, but I have an
based on
epistemic
how our brains work.
foundation that I appeal to
Yeah.
for foundational morals. You don't.
That's the same
So
as
you
me.
think
appeal
that
to
everyone should
intuition.
have to subscribe to the Christian God, and that is
That's
who
not how
decides
he
who has
said.
free will?
I think that Christian ethics.
I'm confused as to what that.
We're
has
not
to do with
even.
bodily.
We weren't talking about free will.
Okay, so then what
We're
is?
talking about bodily autonomy now.
Okay, so then based on
Your definition of bodily autonomy,
Yes.
the one that you gave me,
Sure.
we would definitely need to violate it, and you even agree to that. So,
in what? Just for abortion or what?
No, for the purpose of like suicide, cutting yourself with razor blades, all sorts of various things that you could do to yourself for self-harm that we would step in and violate your bodily autonomy over.
Okay, so outside of those specific examples in which someone is committing an act of harm, which I also removed from my definition of bodily
Then I
autonomy.
don't consider that bodily autonomy anymore by your definition.
Okay.
Your definition would have to be something
Dude,
different
like the
than your
right to go
definition.
to the fucking grocery store. Who has that right? Who are you saying under your standpoint of government, what is it based on your equal force objection
So-
can women do
Yeah.
that they should not be allowed
So
to
let's
do?
untangle some ideas. When you say who has a right to go to a grocery store, who has an inherent right to go to a grocery store?
Nobody.
Or who has a physical right enforced by men to go to a